We are live, El Cuco.
We are live. We do it live all night long.
Yes, yes, my friend, yes. You know, you were talking about El Chapo. See, El Chapo don't know about El Cuco.
No, or no El Kakui either.
Nor does the El Chapo know about El Cucuy. Oh, man. Anyway, bro, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Good morning. Good morning. Apologize for the delay of jumping on here.
It's all CJ's fault. He was trying to Donde Estas Tequila. Yes.
Sí, amigo.
It's one of those mornings, bro. One of those mornings. You know, I was reading something very interesting, Siege.
What's that, V?
I was reading a very interesting article, and it was on Zero Hedge.
Okay.
And it was about just Julian Assange, right?
Yep.
And you remember when Julian got pinched back in April, and you and I both said, "God, it's been that long already." See, back in April.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's like October going to November now.
Yeah.
And remember back in April, we both were like, "We'll be surprised if this guy ever makes it to extradition. They'll probably kill him in jail."
Yep. Right. Correct.
And so I was reading this article. It was by Craig Murray, who's a friend of Julian Assange. And a little bit of that I'm going to read is this. I was deeply shaken while witnessing yesterday's events in Westminster Magistrates Court. Every decision was railroaded through over scarcely heard arguments and objections of Assange's legal team by a magistrate who barely pretended to be listening. Before I get on the blatant lack of a fair process, the first thing I must note was Julian's condition. I was badly shocked just by how much weight my friend has lost, by the speed of his hair has receded, and by the appearance of premature and vastly accelerated aging. He has a pronounced limp I've never seen before. Since his arrest, he has lost over 15 kgs in weight, or like 40 pounds. But his physical appearance was not as shocking as his mental deterioration. When asked to give his name and date of birth, he struggled visibly over several seconds to recall both. I will come to the important content of his statement at the end of the proceedings in due course. But his difficulty in making it was very evident. It was a real struggle for him to articulate the words and focus his train of thought. Until yesterday, I had been quietly skeptical of those who claimed that Julian's treatment amounted to torture. Even Nils Melzner, the UN special reporter on torture, and skeptical of those who suggested he may be subject to debilitating drug treatments. But having attended his trials in Uzbekistan of several victims of extreme torture and having worked with survivors from Sierra Leone and elsewhere, I can tell you that yesterday changed my mind entirely, and Julian exhibited exactly the symptoms of a torture victim brought blinking into the light, particularly in terms of disorientation, confusion, and the real struggle to assert free will through the fog of learned helplessness. I had even been more skeptical of those who claimed, as a senior member of his legal team did on Sunday, that they were worried about that Julian might not live to the end of the extradition process. And CJ, that's exactly what you and I talked about back in April.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I now find myself not only believing it, but haunted by the thought. Everybody in that court yesterday saw that one of the greatest journalists and most important dissidents of our times is being tortured to death by the state before our eyes. To see my friend, the most articulate man, the fastest thinker I have ever known, reduced to shambling and incoherent wreck was unbearable. Yet the agents of the state, and folks, you have to understand, we are united. We have one enemy. We have one competitor. We have one rival in this life, and that is the state and those that are absolute sycophants and vassals to the state. Yet the agents of the state, particularly the callous magistrate Vanessa Barrester, were not just prepared. You figure, being a woman, that she has some sort of compassion. were not just prepared, but eager to be part of the blood sport. She actually told him that if he were incapable of following proceedings, then his lawyers could explain what had happened to him later. Can you believe that, CJ? The question why a man who, by the very charges against him, has acknowledged to be highly intelligent and competent, had been reduced by who? Reduced by who? The state. To somebody incapable of following court proceedings gave her not a millisecond of concern. The charge against Julian is very specific: conspiring with Chelsea Manning to publish Iraq war logs, the Afghanistan war logs, the State Department cables. The charge had nothing to do with Sweden, nothing to do with sex, nothing to do with the 2016 U.S. election. A simple clarification the mainstream media appears incapable of understanding. The purpose of yesterday's hearing was case management, to determine the timetable for the extradition proceedings. The key points at issue were that Julian's defense was requesting more time to prepare their evidence and arguing that political offenses were specifically excluded from the extradition treaty. There should be, they argued, therefore be a preliminary hearing to determine whether the extradition treaty even applied at all. But what the lawyers fail to understand here, folks, is that when you have political offenses against the empire, when you brought shame on the deep state, especially the cocaine import agency, then at that point, you are fair game. And at that point, any laws, any rules, anything having to do with humanity gets thrown out the window. The reasons given by Assange's defense team for more time to prepare were both compelling and startling. They had very limited access to their client in jail and had not been permitted to hand him any documents about the case until a week ago. Can you imagine this? You've been in lockup, you've been in the solitary, you've been tortured since April. And it wasn't until last week your lawyers could even hand you a document to bring you up to speed about your own case. It's egregious. It's inhumane. He had also only just been given limited computer access, and his relevant records and materials has been seized from the Ecuadorian embassy by the U.S. government, and he has no access to his own materials for the purpose of preparing his defense. Furthermore, the defense argued that they were in touch with the Spanish courts about the very important and relevant legal case in Madrid, which would provide vital evidence. It showed that the CIA had been directly ordering spying on Julian in the embassy through a Spanish company called UC Global. They were contracted to provide security there, crucially. And this includes spying on privileged conversations between Assange and his lawyers, which is, again, an egregious violation, and which has been in train in the U.S. since 2010. In normal processes, that would, in fact, itself be sufficient to have the extradition proceedings dismissed. The man should be walking around free. You see, here we have facts with videographic proof that a private security company was videotaping the most private discussions between Julian Assange and his lawyers, and they were passing it off to the CIA. Absolute, unequivocal proof. Case closed. The extradition hearing should be thrown out, and the man should walk free. But we live in clown world, CJ. We live in clown world. For the prosecution, James Lewis QC stated that the government strongly opposed any delay being given for the defense to prepare and strongly opposed any separate consideration of the question of whether the charge was a political offense excluded by the extradition treaty. Barrister, the evil see you next Tuesday, that is the judge over there, took her cue from Lewis like a good little lackey and stated categorically the date for extradition hearing is the 25th of February. Could not be changed. She was open to changes in dates for submission of evidence and response before this, and called a 10-minute recess for the prosecution and defense to agree these steps. What happened next was instructive. There were 5 representatives of the U.S. government present initially. 2 more arrived at the course of the hearing, seated at the desk behind the lawyers in the court. The prosecution lawyers immediately went into a huddle with the U.S. representatives and then went outside the courtroom with them to decide how to respond on the dates. And after the recess, the defense team stated that they could not, in their professional opinion, adequately prepare if the hearing date were kept to February. But within the barrister's instructions to do so, they nevertheless outlined a proposed timeline on delivery of evidence. In responding to this, Lewis's junior counsel scurried to the back of the court to consult the Americans again, while Lewis actually told the judge he was taking instructions from those behind. It is important to note that he said this. It was not the UK Attorney General's office who were being consulted, but the U.S. Embassy. Wait a minute, CJ. I thought I thought the whole plan here, as was espoused by the movement of the alphabetarian, the fellow alphabetarian named Q, was that Assange is to be rescued out of the embassy. He was to be whistled away. He's being held safely in secure corridors. That he's in fact in the United States, ready to be red carpeted into the halls of Congress to be an active witness against Hillary Clinton and the deep state. Were not this the very conspiracy theory that was floated and flouted about in the boards of 4chan, 8chan, and 16chan, CJ?
Yeah, I think that was fairly accurate, V, in terms of what was happening behind the scenes.
Yep.
V.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what they were saying, right? I mean, they're just going out there saying all this stuff, and we're seeing Assange. I don't think this guy's gonna make it, bro.
Yeah, with Julian, there's so many different things, to say, and I almost started to say something silly, but to understand this, it's just, I guess, disappointing is an understatement in regards to what is happening here, and I don't know what it's going to take for people to understand. I mean, our listeners, understand Julian, understand what information that he released. I mean, all the criminality, everything that he exposed. But unfortunately, I guarantee, like, if you took a pulse of your person off the street, whatever, and said, Julian Assange, a hero or a traitor or whatever, that for the most part, people would deem him, as a traitor. And what most people also need to understand is the fact that, along with saying that, there's not enough public outcry for there to be any type of intervention to occur. I think in part what is disappointing, to me, is that I'm glad we're covering this today. Last night I watched a very good podcast over on Ron Paul's channel, because they specifically talked about this.
Yeah.
And they showed, time after time again, through many campaign stumps, many of times where, Donald Trump was like, we love WikiLeaks. And I think they showed like 25 times that he stated, oh, we love WikiLeaks. Yeah, we love WikiLeaks. And then point blank, when it was inconvenient at the time to acknowledge WikiLeaks, he, said, well, I don't know about WikiLeaks and everything else like that. And so there's going to be people that are going to try to justify that by saying, well, he didn't want to get, further questions asked about what he does, what he doesn't know, all those types of things. And, as much as that can be, attempted to be justified or whatever, what can't be is the fact that this administration has allowed itself to be influenced, to pardon people, to allow people, not you and I, not the people that are on this, that are listening to this podcast, to be able to influence this administration into making decisions. And where I'm going with this, V, is perhaps maybe if Kim Kardashian or Kanye West was able to talk to the president about Julian and the unjust, that maybe that would be enough influence. To do something. But again, it's just, I posted this earlier today, but it's just a crying shame that the the true patriots, the people who have exposed so much in regards to the criminality of the United States, the intelligence offices, they're deemed as treasonous. They are in exile. They are in prison, and those that are in Washington D.C. Are allowed to continuously, roam free. And I'm taking this, I'm borrowing this from someone, but they made a very valid point that I think that what we have is a two-class system, and it's not broken down into economic or anything like that. It's broken down into the two-class system as those that are part of the federal government and work in Washington, D.C., and those that are not. And those that are in Washington, D.C., the federal government, there are separate rules, there are separate laws, and everything for them, but not us, B.
Exactly. And that's what pisses me off. You know what kills me about this, right? You remember when Tommy Robinson, the guy, that's his fake name, Tommy Robinson, when he was arrested in the UK because of the Muslim grooming gang, the Pakistani grooming gang that was caught. I'm not going to say Muslim. I'm going to say Pakistani, these fucking crazy Salafist bastards. They had the grooming gang when they were grooming these young kids. Hold on one second, Siege. I just had a message.
Yeah, I remember, and I believe he finally was released. It took quite a bit of time.
Yeah. And what happened? Everybody was literally massive amounts of people for as far as the eye could see. They were out there and they were, chanting "Free Tommy." They had the Free Tommy T-shirt, the Free Tommy coffee mugs, the Free Tommy, billboards. I mean, you name it, man. It was a global event, right? It was a global event, and you had Rebel Media, you had all these media companies. Oh, Free Tommy Robinson, dude, not a friggin' peep. When it comes to Julian, I thought about this very deeply, CJ, for a second. I said to myself, "Wow, the state, the all-powerful state, and the statists who serve the state have us so brainwashed that they could have 10,000, 20,000 Brits on the street screaming Free Tommy, because those 10 to 20,000 Brits think that a few misbehaving muzzies living in Luton and in whatever, the Luton and the other place that's filled with these far extremists, the Salafist, terrorist, compliant Muslims, not the normal everyday Muslims, not the good guys who are standing against this crap, but the crazy Wahhabi believers, right? And the state has them convinced that this small percentage of Wahhabi Salafists are more of a threat than the state itself. You see, the inherent terrorist, far the jihadist Wahhabi, okay, and whatnot, they, the state is convinced that they're a bigger threat than the state itself. And those groups and that demographic group does not threaten the state, but they will use that group time and time again as the boogeyman, because the state is what brings them in. The state is what puts them in these horrid conditions. The state is what creates the class warfare. The state is what creates the racial tensions. It's the state. It's the state. And then the state has these manufactured evidence, manufactured scenarios, these false flags. It's the state. And they have their patsies ready to go. It's the state. But when it comes to somebody who challenges directly the very power seat of the state and the lives of the citizen, then that man is shoveled to the corners. That man is completely just silenced and disappeared. He's in lockdown for 23 hours a day, allowed to exercise for 45 minutes, where they just take him by a guard in each arm and they walk around his cell, around the cell block for 45 minutes, limping along the whole entire way, and then put back in for another 23 hours lockdown. This is not a violent person. This is not a. I mean, you have Wall Street guys and City of London guys who have ripped off the taxpayer to the tunes of tens of billions of dollars, and these guys are in country club prison, CJ. I've talked to a few of them. They're in country club prisons. They're getting country club treatment. They're getting some iced tea. They'll have cable television. They have internet. They have their social media. They can talk with their wives and girlfriends. No problem. Because that's the penalty they got to pay. That's the bribe. And a lot of them, when they get out, guess what? They're coming right back into fortunes. They're coming right back into the business they run. You don't believe me? Go ask Jared Kushner's dad. You don't believe me? Go ask his dad, because he's right back with the same scumbag con artist that he was running with before. His father is.
Yeah, I mean, how do you influence the change? How do you create a more awareness around this? And you're right. I mean, for the most part, here in the United States, it's been absolute silent, and that for the most part should really be. I mean, that should shake people quite a bit to understand that. And I think in part, I may be wrong. However, maybe people are fine with giving up a lot of our freedoms, around our liberties. That people are comfortable with the mass surveillance. People are comfortable with regime change wars, as long as it's it's benefiting me. It's not changing my lifestyle and all those things. It says a lot, kind of like what you referred to yesterday, in terms of culturally of where we are, that we accept the state, and we don't defend freedom and liberty. And have we reached that point where we have been indoctrinated? We've been so conditioned to be willing victims through this, that we've lacked that will of resistance to fight back. Are we at that point? I think it's a real question, V, that I think needs to be asked.
No, it seriously is a question that needs to be asked, because this is the mind control. This is the programming of the state, right? The state, here you have the one man who is literally should be Time Magazine's, if Time Magazine was actually a legitimate publication, but it's not anymore. But in the classical sense, Time Magazine's Person of the Year. He should be a Nobel Prize winner. In the classical sense, when Nobel Prize winning actually meant something before they gave it to idiots like Obama, and they're considering morons like that child actress, what's her name, Greta von Thunberg. That's what Julian is. Julian is our age's. I mean, you name it. This is the guy. He's like an informational Spartacus. And rather than us getting behind him, rather than the population, especially the Western governments, screaming, there should be protests from she to signing C. There should be protests all over Europe, all over the Netherlands, all over the UK about Free Julian. But we don't care, because Kanye West has a church service going on. And we don't care because we got prison reform. And we don't care because, what's important is the political soap opera that's taking place. Oftentimes, CJ, I think to myself, are we being distracted on a grand scale? Are we just being distracted? Because I'll be honest with you, if I was quote unquote a good guy, if I was quote unquote a patriot, if I was quote unquote working in the inner recesses of the white hats in the government, so to speak, wouldn't it be in my absolute best endeavor, CJ, that I would work diligently, without ceasing, without stopping, without yielding 1 minute of any day to make sure that I can get Assange to freedom as quickly as possible. You would think I would do that, right?
Right.
But that's not what's happening, bro. And then on the Joe Rogan podcast, did you listen to the whole thing with Snowden?
I did.
What are some of the things he said?
Well, just in the context, it primarily is because Edward Snowden did write a book, and the book primarily was more of a bio regarding his background. I think in some sense he's trying to get to people to understand that he's like you and I, that he loves freedom, he loves liberty, he is a patriot. And it's just amazing the efforts put forth by the State Department. Lawsuits were filed against his publisher. Lawsuits were filed against him personally to try to prevent this book from, it's already published, it's there, but, there's no publicity over the book, just very little. So that was one of the reasons, Snowden was very transparent that's the reason I came on your podcast, Joe, because, you do have a huge audience. And, at time, I know there's a lot of people who think that Joe's kind of paid off in terms of some of the stuff he discusses and everything like that. But it's more just, really in depth in terms of his bio, his background. And then obviously he goes into details as to, what occurred through the information that he was able to view, glance at, and, how he believed and perceived this as being completely wrong, which it is. It was completely wrong. This mass, surveillance system. And there was an attempt, and why he was so convinced to do what he did was the fact that there were attempts by Congress people to expose the criminality of this mass surveillance systems. And he expresses that some of these oversight committees, they cannot just openly release this information, but there were public hearings. Everyone remembers when James Clapper. What's your famous nickname for him? James the Clapper.
The Clap, which is
whatever.
a term for a type of STD for the people that don't know, a sexually transmitted disease. Slang term, the Clap. I think it's for this is for chlamydia. I think they call it the Clap. If I'm not mistaken.
He was point blank asked in a public televised hearing that or can I get a yes or no question from you, Mr. Clapper? Are you aware of any mass surveillance system, warrantless surveillance system that's currently happening on the American people? And Clapper just point blank, no, there's nothing like this occurring, which the congressperson knew that it was a lie. Clapper knew it was a lie. And apparently behind the scenes, he was actually sent a letter saying, hey, would you like to revise your statement regarding that? So it was interesting to find out that what ended up transpiring and what led him to do this is because he knew directly who was involved with creating this. And it was kind of a word of caution in many ways. And who developed this entire mass surveillance program, the concept, the idea, even that it was lawful to do, was Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney and his private attorney were the brainchildren behind this whole surveillance system, and deeming it that it was lawful. Apparently there's a paper that says that, hey, this is what we found out, this is why we feel it's lawful, but we're going to put it in a locked cabinet and no one can see why we're justifying that we can do this. So long story short, after Snowden finally realized that all proper methods of channels were going to be exhausted, is why he took the actions that he did, is that he realized that they actually changed the rules to exonerate George Bush back right before the election when this started to come out regarding this mass surveillance system. It was kind of like information happens today where it's kind of leaked to the media. The media covers it in very high level. They don't go into details, just out of risk of putting anyone at any type of danger. So then the Congress gets involved and pass laws to basically allow these things to happen. And that's when he decided, you know what, I'm going to take action. He specifically, like even before we knew this was happening, and even before he had to flee the United States, he did have a meeting with 4 different journalists, and they kind of established, protocol. He was so concerned that, hey, look, I don't want people put in harm's way. I think that, if we get this out in the media and we talk about it at a high level, we can put enough pressure on individuals to acknowledge some of this stuff to make a difference. And when they attempted to do this, it in fact didn't happen. And so that's when he went ahead and released the full memo, which was an understanding of this program, and how he gained access to it was because of his position. His position was oversight and accessing and giving people keys to access to different systems. So as a system administrator, you have access to a lot of things. And when this document happened to come across his chain, his email, he was able to obtain that. And apparently this document that he read is public knowledge now. It's out there and available. And it's still to this day, it's continued to happen. And there were some other early bird, whistleblowers, Bill Benny, who I think that you and Harley have had on before. Yeah. So there have been several players, other people who have attempted to release this information. But again, it's gaining enough traction for people here in the United States to understand that. And we have just, again, I know that you asked about the interview, so I think every listener should go listen to it. It does get long in some parts, but I think overall it's a Snowden's very much attempt to explain his actions, to tell his life story in a way. This is going to become his legacy, right? And he's trying to set the record straight. He's trying to set the record straight, and that, hey, this is my book. Please read it so you understand that I'm not un-American. I am a patriot. This is why I did this. This is why I try to help. And a lot of messages that really resonate. And I think it'd be a value for everyone to take time to go listen to it. So I think that's the most concerning thing, is that that we are such a compliant society, that we don't realize that our freedoms, our liberty, these mass surveillance systems that are being put in place, and to date, these things are still occurring, and we are, and it's I'm not sure what we need to do to shake. Is it too late to do that? Is it too late to shake people enough? What point will we have to arrive at a society until people start waking up and people start caring enough about these things?
You want to know something, man? It's like on the live chat, we have John Michael Karma. I think he said it best: cheap food and cheap gas. And that's exactly why no one's not doing anything. Why? It's not hurting their bottom line. It's not punching them in the wallet. There's no impetus. See, freedom, nobody gives, and this is something that the social scientists, is they figured it out. As long as you give the slave enough bread and circus, he will never question his slavery. He will never act out against you. He will never bite the hand that feeds him. As long as he has his bread and circus, as long as there's cheap gas, as long as there's cheap food, there's a game on the TV, no one's going to care. Why? Because the impetus to do something is just not there. The motivation to fight, the motivation to struggle is not there. And for a lot of these people, they're not going to know any of this crap until it's too late, until they're on the line, the long line to the slaughterhouse, and they're not listening to us bulls who are out here bucking, who are out here making all sorts of commotion, who are constantly ramming the fences, who are constantly charging the gates and throwing our bodies against it, trying to smash it open. These are the gates of people's thinking. These are the gates of people's minds. This is what we're doing. And, many of the folks that listen to programs like this, they're doing the same thing. It is individuals like you folks that are listening, that are out there, that are literally expanding the human thought, moving it forward, trying to get people to think critically. And, dude, when you look at this mass distraction, like look at the Trump rally in Dallas, right? And I'm not talking about the rally in and of itself, but I'm talking about this protesting crap outside, where you have the right versus the left. You have these content creators, these YouTubers are out there interviewing people, and okay, fine, you're interviewing people, you're trying to win logical arguments with people that are totally illogical. The question is, are we winning the culture? Are we winning the culture? And I don't know if we are. I can't say that we are, man, because because right now nobody cares. Why? Because the gravy train, which is artificially propped up by the Federal Reserve, keeps rolling. Nobody cares. And this is why I oftentimes think to myself, my God, I think the greatest act of mercy that God could do to this country is collapse its economy. I think this is the greatest act of mercy. Then people could possibly wake up.
Yeah, that's a great point that our listener made. And be sorry to interrupt you, but I wanted to share. It's crazy you're saying this because in this interview, pardon me, Snowden specifically pointed something out in terms of when as a society, when does one begin to recognize that? And he made a comparison, if you will, to the failed Soviet Union, the collapse of the Soviet Union, where at the point where people were struggling, there was no money, they were struggling to find food, to pay for these things. And it led to the rise of Vladimir Putin. And by no means am I saying Putin is a terrible individual, whatever.
No, I love him. I think he's him and Sergei Lavrov, in my opinion, are the two greatest statesmen on this planet, period.
Well, and to think of that in comparison is that then take a look at the current reign that Putin has been there, where he's now there, 20 years, coming up on close to 20 years, where, they have changed the laws and so forth like that. So, again, I'm just saying that there's, as when we reach that point and people are that broken, that what we're willing to accept. And at the point where, let's say, for example, that we as a society collapse so much and that's the caution we have to be at when that happens, when, either inflation, whatever happens, potentially with the economy, the dollar and everything else like that, that if we look at it and capitalism, patriotism, nationalism is blamed for all of this demise, right? That what as a society will we accept? Will we then embrace socialism? Will we then embrace these crazy things these fanatics want? That's the caution flag to me that we have to be aware of.
Yep, I agree wholeheartedly, man. I agree wholeheartedly. And that's the whole thing. If you're not winning the culture, okay, and right now the culture are a bunch of morons. Go to your local malls, folks, and look into the eyes of most of these young people, these idiots that are in college, right? Take a good look into their eyes. And you tell me if there's a critical thinking brain in any of their heads. Please tell me, because I certainly do not see that. Walk around. Look at the kids. Look at the young boys all walking around with man boobs. They're all soft. They're all squishy. I had a chance to meet CJ and his family, and his two boys are young, strapping, masculine, energetic. These kids have the spark of life in them. And it was so happy. My wife and I were talking about it. We're so happy to see his two sons. They're just have the spark of life, because oftentimes, especially in New York, I'm walking around here in New York, man. I look at most of these boys; they're dead. They have the dead eyes. They have soft, squishy bodies. They have no athleticism. They have ginormous thumbs, CJ, from all the video gaming that they've been doing, but that's about it.
Yeah,
the thumb muscles are massive. If thumb wrestling was an Olympic sport, these guys would be shoo-ins.
Up until the Fortnite servers crashed, and then they went lunatics. They went full craziness. Well, I appreciate those kind words, V, and I think in part, I think we asked some very challenging questions as we navigate through this, as a society, and there's a lot that has to change. There will be players who will be out there to script that future and what it's going to entail. So we'll have to just carefully monitor these things as we progress. And in part, coming up, apparently, whatever happens, the next couple years in regards to the elections, those particular outcomes, and I've said this, several times in previous broadcasts, is that really pay attention to what's happening within your community. I've said this on a few different things in terms of different platforms in regards to individual health. That ideally in terms of wealth and those things, that's something that you have to give back to yourself, and as far as your individual health and those things, because those will definitely be important as well as we navigate through this.
What kills me also, man, it's like, I think the American public is done. I think we're done seeing these idiots and these curmudgeons constantly just getting a simple slap on the wrist and nothing's being done. I mean, look, right now Jay Martin over at Live Chat is saying that Facebook's Zuck is getting grilled on the Hill. Yeah, Zuck's getting grilled on the Hill. All these but I would love to see Facebook and all these tech monopolies broken up. I would love to see that, man.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one part of it. But also just evaluating everything from, the educations, the early indoctrination that occurs, in our school. There's just so much to take a look at. But at the same time, we can't give up. We gotta stay steadfast, and just continue having these conversations, and trying to expand our audience and bringing in other people to understand the perspective of where we're coming from. Absolutely.
Yeah. Here's an eye opener, man. A lot of people, just touching the whole social media thing. A lot of people will say things like, "Hey, you know what? Well, at least unlike China, we don't have social credit here." Yeah, we do. We do, folks. You've all heard the stories of people getting their bank account shut down. They're getting deplatformed. They're getting censored. Their ability to live and to earn a living and to pay their bills has been completely cut off because of their political stance. It's happening. It's happening. You think this is going to go away? No, it's going to exacerbate. And this is why I keep telling people, listen, if you're in your 40s and you're still using personal credit, you're not doing it right. And this is why I keep telling people, listen, if you're still buying and purchasing and transacting using your own legal name, you're not doing it right. And if you want to learn how to do it right, hey, look, join the Patreon and contact me. And I'll tell you how to do it right. I'll tell you how to live like a gorilla, right? But other than that, see, here's another thing. Then the other thing people will often say, Siege, is, well, we don't have that communistic, transfer of wealth. We don't have any of that. Yeah, we do. We absolutely do have transfer of wealth.
Yeah, we do. Yep.
Look, I mean, today's news: $3.22 trillion, $3.2 trillion of federal programs that transfer income, projected to hit record for fiscal year 20. Federal spending programs that are designed to transfer income to individuals or families are set to hit a record $3.22 trillion in fiscal 2020.
Bingo, and that's how it gets accomplished. Absolutely.
Bingo.
Yep.
You want to talk about transfer of wealth? You folks, you got to understand, it ain't the muzzy that's your enemy. It ain't the far left nut job who doesn't reproduce because he doesn't know what gender he is because he's maybe 50 some odd genders. It's not the pink-haired feminazi who works in some social media company just sipping her latte frappe, mochaccino, docachino. It ain't any of that. It ain't the gay guy. It ain't the lesbo. It ain't the feminazi. It ain't the muzzy. It ain't the communist Chinese. It is not the evil Russians or the Ukrainians. It ain't the Mexicans. It ain't the illegal aliens coming down from Guatemala and Honduras and all these other places. All of these are just signs and symptoms, artificially created, though real, but artificially created symptoms of one enemy and one enemy alone. Your enemy is not any of these things, folks. Your enemy, your problem is the state, and you've allowed it. You've allowed it while you were swilling your beer and watching your football and eating your pork rinds and knocking down some wings. And boy, do I love doing those things. But you've allowed it. The average American has allowed the state to grow up around them. And now the state, the most evil, most heinous thing in the world that our founding fathers have warned about since time immemorial, the state, which is the number one mass murderer, the number one psychopathic killer. And I saw the movie Joker. I loved it. If you haven't seen the movie Joker, go see it. But the number one psychopathic mass murderer in human history is the state. If you don't believe me, look up the term democide, death by government. 254 million people were eradicated, murdered, slaughtered, genocided, wiped off the face of the earth by the state in the last century alone. The state is not your friend. You've allowed this evil entity to raise up, this parasite that is now on the verge of killing the host, this evil entity. You've allowed it to gain so much power. And now it is not only a competitor, it is your rival. And the state is doing everything it can to do what? To rob you of your money. These so-called payments for individuals, or as the OBM, the Office for Management and Budget, account for 67.9% of all federal and fiscal spending and consume 14.5% of the nation's gross domestic product. In the historical table, the composition outlays that the OMB reports that the annual amount spent on payments for individuals going back to fiscal year 1940 in both current year and constant fiscal 2012 dollars. In the same table, it published the estimated totals for fiscal year 2019 through fiscal year 2024. In 1940, the federal government spent, now listen to this, 2.1% of GDP on payments for individuals. As a percentage of GDP, these payments peaked in fiscal year 2010 to 15.5%. But in the inflation-adjusted dollars, the total amount the federal government spends on these payments has increased since then. In fiscal 2020, federal payments for individuals total $2.4 trillion in constant 2012 dollars. But by fiscal year 2019, according to the Office of Money and Budget, the estimate has increased to $2.8 trillion in constant fiscal dollars. And here we are. We are in 2020, and we're projected to hit a whopping massacre-sized $3.2 trillion. We don't have. Do you understand how people get into these stupid arguments about surface issues, right? Surface issues that don't matter, right? Like, oh, we need to, just look how great the economy is doing. We're fighting for freedom. We're the freest country in the world. No, we're not. We're number 40 something on the scale of 100 freest country. We're like number 40 something. I think we're slightly below Romania, CJ. That's a good thing, right? Yeah. We're slightly ahead of Romania, something like that. Last I looked. But we have freedom of the press. No, you don't. You have a controlled press. CJ, when you and I were growing up, there were 54 media companies. CJ and I are Generation X. 54 media companies when CJ and I were growing up, coming up in the 70s and 80s. Today, there's 4. When cell phones started, CJ, you remember when cell phones started like in the 90s? We got the Motorola StarTAC flip. These young kids don't know nothing about that. Yeah. Right? They don't know about the Nokia 3135, right? The little candy bar phone that was so tiny, if you lost it, you lost it. And we used to joke around, how small are they making these phones? They're going to make it so small, you're going to lose it. Boy, were we wrong. Right? But how many cell phone companies? There was Verizon, there was AT&T, there was Singular, there was oh my God, there was Nextel, there was Sprint, there was the list goes on and on. There was T-Mobile was coming out, and there was all these cell phone companies. Now there's what, CJ? 4? Yep. Soon to be 3. Because the Sprint T-Mobile merge got approved, right? See, everywhere you look is a cartel. And all the cartels exist as what? As vassals of who? The state. The state. And the one guy, CJ, the one guy who could have helped kill the state is rotting in a British jail. You know what his problem was? You know what Julian Assange's biggest mistake is?
What's that?
He ran into an Ecuadorian embassy when he should have ran into a Russian one. That was his biggest mistake. I'll tell you right now, if I have the feds on me, I'm getting into my M5, my twin-turboed, 750 horsepower German super missile, and I'm going to make it as fast as I can to the nearest Russian embassy. That's exactly what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna look. Me and my family, we love you guys. I'm a big fan of Putin. I love Sergei Lavrov. He's a scholar and a gentleman. Let me in. I'm a political prisoner. This is exactly what I'm gonna do.
Absolutely.
All right, man. With that being said, folks, we're at the end of the show. Check us out on our paid sponsors. Please support us. Just go over to mycbdedibles.com, mycbdedibles.com. Make sure you guys go over there, check it out, buy some stuff. All right, it helps out us. It helps out our bottom line, especially in this crazy, twisted YouTube world we're living in with Scroogle and all those companies just constantly screwing with us. And also check out the Patreon. Join the Patreon. Support the Guerrilla directly. You want to be a private client? I have some spots available. If you are interested in being a private client, it's you can join me and be a part of my elite group for up to 365 days of yours truly. Anyway, just check us out. Support us. Show your love for us. With that being said, we're over and out. I'm going to take it away, CJ.